The room exploded with silence so sharp, it felt like glass shattering in my chest. I stared at Daniel, my best friend, and the words he had spoken moments earlier burned inside my skull. He said, "I love her, not you." My hands trembled as I clutched the table's edge, trying to keep my world from collapsing. Emily, the girl who had unknowingly stood between us, looked frozen, her lips parted but no sound coming out. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would break through my ribs. I whispered, "After everything we swore, this is how it ends." Daniel avoided my eyes, but guilt flickered across his face like a dying flame. Emily's gaze darted between us, confusion painted across her expression. A laugh, bitter and hollow, escaped my throat as I felt betrayal gnawing deeper with every second. The room smelled of dust and cheap wine, yet all I could sense was the raw, searing heat of betrayal. Daniel finally said, "I never meant to hurt you." My voice cracked as I whispered, "But you did, and now nothing will ever be the same." The silence stretched so long it felt like an eternity, broken only by my own uneven breaths. I thought of the nights Daniel and I had sworn loyalty, sitting under the stars and promising nothing would ever come between us. Emily stood still like a fragile statue caught in the storm we created. My heart screamed at me to believe it was a mistake, but every flicker of his guilty eyes told me otherwise. Daniel muttered, "I didn't plan for this to happen." The words dug deeper than knives. Emily whispered, "I never wanted to be the reason you two broke apart." I closed my eyes, and memories of laughter, of promises carved into our lives, collided with the present. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in the room until it matched the wreck inside me. But instead I said softly, "Lies have sharp edges, and I am bleeding from every one of them." I could almost hear the echo of Daniel's laughter from years ago, our voices weaving together in careless joy. That sound was a ghost now, haunting me in this silence. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her necklace, twisting it nervously. I remembered the night we promised each other forever. Two boys sitting on a rooftop, staring at the stars, dreaming of a future unbroken. Daniel said, "We were just kids then." His voice cracked. I whispered, "We were kids who meant it." Emily's eyes glistened as if she carried the weight of both our hearts. I wanted to believe Daniel, to find some shred of the friend I once knew, but betrayal was louder than memory. The present tore me back like a cruel hand. Daniel's silence screamed louder than words. Emily tried to speak, but her voice broke before it could form a sentence. My chest tightened with the realization that the man before me was no longer my brother in loyalty, but a stranger dressed in betrayal. "Do you even remember who we were?" I asked, my voice jagged. Daniel blinked, his throat working as if he swallowed the words he refused to say. Emily whispered, "Please, don't let me be the end of you both." Her plea cut through the tension, but the chasm between us had already been carved. The wine glass tipped and fell, shattering across the floor like the pieces of us, scattered beyond repair. Emily gasped and bent down to gather shards, her hands shaking. Daniel reached to stop her, but I stepped between them. "Don't touch it," I said, my voice steady but hollow. The fragments reflected the lamplight, tiny mirrors of our broken bond. Emily whispered, "Everything is ruined." Daniel clenched his jaw and said nothing. I looked at him, my heart aching with rage and grief, and said, "No, Daniel, everything is exposed." The air felt poisoned, every breath thick with the taste of betrayal. The silence that followed was heavier than words could bear. The memory of our laughter clung to me like a phantom, pulling me back to when Daniel and I were inseparable. We were just boys chasing fireflies in summer air, promising the world would never divide us. "We'll always be brothers," Daniel had said, grinning as his palm smacked mine in a messy handshake. Back then, the night sky seemed to cheer for us, stars winking like eternal witnesses. Emily was not part of those days, and betrayal was not a word that lived in my vocabulary. I felt warmth when I thought of us leaning on rusty fences, talking about our dreams as if they belonged only to us. "I'll guard your secrets," I had said once. Daniel's face then was bright with trust, untouched by the shadows that would later devour him. The memory should have been a comfort, but it twisted cruelly, reminding me how much I had already lost. The echo of whispered secrets returned like faded ink on an old page. I remembered lying on Daniel's floor, staring at glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to his ceiling. We laughed about nothing, yet every word felt like treasure. "No one else will ever know," he had whispered after confessing his fear of being left behind. I had laughed softly, replying, "You're stuck with me forever." The room back then smelled of bubblegum and cheap pizza, and the world outside could not touch us. Emily's presence now felt like an intruder in those sacred memories. My heart cracked because those small, unguarded moments were proof of what once was. And now, looking at Daniel's silence, I realized forever had always been more fragile than I believed. There was a night on the rooftop when we carved our loyalty into the air itself. The city hummed below, but all I heard was our voices weaving promises into the stars. Daniel had held out his fist, and I tapped mine against it, swearing nothing could break us. "Even if the world turns," I said. "Even if the world burns," he replied, smiling like he believed it. The skyline glowed with scattered lights, and the wind tugged at our hair, carrying our pact higher than rooftops. That night, I believed in eternity. Emily's face blurred into the thought now, her presence rewriting the sacred vows we had made. My stomach twisted because the truth mocked every promise carved in the night sky. I remembered the time Daniel had defended me when I was too weak to stand. In the schoolyard, laughter had turned cruel, but he shoved the bullies away like he carried my pain as his own. He looked back and grinned. "No one touches my brother." I believed him with every heartbeat. We limped away with bruised knees but lighter hearts, laughing as if nothing could hurt us when we were together. That image haunted me now, because the same hands that once shielded me had pushed me into the fire of betrayal. Emily glanced at me recently with pity, but she would never understand the weight of that history. I wanted to scream at Daniel. "You weren't supposed to be my enemy." A memory surfaced of us by the lake, skipping stones until the sky swallowed the sun. The water mirrored our faces side by side, reflecting something pure and unbroken. Daniel had said softly, "Even if we lose everything else, we won't lose this." I had nodded, tossing another stone into the rippling waves, unaware that time would make liars of us both. Emily's sorrow now was only a whisper compared to the roaring ache of betrayal. I wished the boy at that lake could step into the present and remind us of who we were. But all I had left was the ghost of a promise echoing across rippling water. The calls began to go unanswered, each ring dissolving into silence that gnawed at me. Daniel once picked up with a hurried excuse, claiming he was too busy, but his tone felt colder than any winter night. I stared at my phone, wondering when my brother in loyalty had turned into a stranger hiding in plain sight. Emily's messages felt strangely delayed, her words shorter, her warmth slipping away. I told myself it was nothing, just life stretching us apart. But deep down I knew cracks were spreading like hairline fractures across glass. At night I replayed every laugh, every promise, searching for where we began to unravel. I whispered into the dark, "We were supposed to last forever," but the silence mocked me. The first time Emily lingered longer than usual, I noticed it in Daniel's eyes. A glance stretched a second too long, a silence that spoke louder than words. She laughed softly at something trivial, and he watched her as if she were the only person alive. My chest tightened as if betrayal had already begun before it was named. I pretended not to see it because seeing meant admitting my world was about to collapse. Emily caught my gaze and quickly looked away, guilt flickering like a match about to burn out. Daniel cleared his throat and said, "It's nothing." But nothing had never felt so dangerous. The first broken promise came small, almost unnoticeable. Daniel swore he'd help me with a project we planned for months, but when the day came, he vanished with an excuse thin as air. I stood waiting, hours bleeding into dusk, the empty bench beside me screaming louder than words. Emily later said she saw him somewhere else, laughter spilling from his lips, a sound that once belonged to us alone. My jaw ached from grinding teeth, my heart heavier than stone. Maybe he forgot, I muttered, but the lie tasted bitter. I knew forgetting wasn't the crime. Choosing was. Daniel's smile began to feel like a mask stitched too tight. He laughed when we gathered, but his eyes never stayed on me anymore. They drifted, searching for something, or someone. Emily sat near us, and I watched him study her with a hunger he tried to hide. My stomach twisted as if poison slid through my veins. I wanted to shout at him, to remind him of everything we had sworn, but my tongue froze. I wondered if betrayal always begins quietly, like a storm whispering at the edges before it roars. It was the silent observer who first dared to voice what I refused to see. Sarah, our mutual friend, leaned close and whispered, "Something isn't right." I laughed weakly, pretending her words were paranoia, but my heart pounded with dread. She had seen Daniel pull away when my name was mentioned, had caught Emily flustered when asked about her evenings. Sarah's voice carried no malice, only the ache of truth, and it terrified me. I muttered, "You're wrong," though every part of me knew she was not. Her reply was quiet but sharp as glass. "You can't stop cracks from spreading when the wall is already breaking." The truth reached me not through Daniel or Emily, but through a whisper carried by Sarah. She leaned close, eyes heavy with pity, and said, "I saw them together when you thought they were apart." My stomach flipped as though the ground had collapsed under me. I tried to laugh it away, to accuse her of spinning illusions, but her voice shook with sincerity. "It wasn't just once," she continued, her words falling like stones. My chest tightened, denial clawing at me, screaming for refuge. I whispered, "He wouldn't." But every memory of Daniel's lingering glances and Emily's nervous silences replayed in my mind. Betrayal had not only arrived, it had been living with me in disguise. I confronted Daniel with trembling words, my voice sharp but unsteady. "Tell me she's lying." His silence weighed more than any answer. He rubbed his palms together, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor as if guilt was carved there. Emily stood nearby, lips pressed so tight they turned pale. My heart screamed for them to deny it, to fight for the friendship I thought we shared. But Daniel's throat worked, and his voice cracked as he whispered, "I never meant for it to happen." The admission sliced through me. I staggered back, the air thick with betrayal. I realized silence had always been his loudest confession. The betrayal unfolded with no mercy. Emily's voice shook as she admitted, "I didn't know how to stop it." My chest burned, each word tearing deeper into the bond we once swore was unbreakable. Daniel reached for me, his hand trembling, but I recoiled as if his touch was poison. "You were my brother," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. He stammered, "It was never supposed to be you who got hurt." The irony crushed me, because I was the only one who could never escape the wreckage. Emily's sobs filled the room like echoes of a graveyard, and I felt the ground beneath us give way. Everything I believed had just shattered. Daniel's voice turned sharp, almost defensive, as if betrayal needed justification. "I was tired of being in your shadow," he spat, anger breaking through guilt. His words echoed like gunshots, reshaping every moment we had shared. Emily cried, "Don't twist this into something cruel." My heart pounded, my world spinning as I whispered, "You wanted what was mine, and you took it." Daniel's face twisted with rage and regret, his mask finally stripped away. The friend I once knew was gone, replaced by a stranger carved from envy. The truth no longer hid in shadows, it screamed in every broken word. Sarah stepped forward from the shadows, her voice carrying final confirmation. "I warned you this would happen," she said, her tone neither cruel nor gentle, only final. Daniel froze. Emily sobbed harder, and I felt my last hope crumble. I had clung to denial like a shield, but now it shattered under the weight of truth. I looked at Daniel and whispered, "You killed us." His eyes widened, but he didn't argue, because there was nothing left to defend. The silence that followed was colder than any storm, sealing the death of everything we once were. The storm finally erupted, No more whispers or hesitant glances, only fire. I shouted, "You destroyed everything we built." My voice cracked, but anger sharpened every word. Daniel roared back, "You were always the one everyone cared about. I was just your shadow." His face twisted with fury, veins visible in his neck. Emily sobbed, her hands covering her face, her voice breaking, "Please stop." But there was no stopping now. The years of laughter, loyalty, and secrets burned like paper in flames. My fists clenched, not to strike, but to hold myself from crumbling. I whispered through clenched teeth, "I loved you like a brother, and you buried me alive." The words turned into weapons sharper than knives. Daniel spat. "You think you're perfect? You always had everything. Respect, love, trust, and I had nothing." His voice shook, fueled by years of hidden envy. I shot back, "You had me. You had everything, and you threw it away." Emily reached for his arm, whispering, "Daniel, please." But he shook her off, eyes burning like wildfire. I felt betrayal drip like acid through every vein. My throat was raw, my chest tight, but still I screamed, "You chose envy over loyalty." His silence cut deeper than his rage. The mask Daniel had worn for years finally shattered. He shouted, "I wanted what was yours because I was tired of being invisible." His confession was a dagger. Emily gasped, covering her mouth, tears streaming. I stood frozen, rage tangled with grief, and whispered, "You never wanted to be my friend. You wanted to be me." His silence confirmed everything I feared. The room shook with more than noise. It trembled with the collapse of trust, loyalty, and love. Every heartbeat screamed betrayal. I pressed a hand to my chest, fighting to breathe, as Emily's sobs filled the silence. Daniel left. For the first time I felt my rage give way to clarity. My voice shook but carried steel. "You may have broken me, but you'll never own me." Daniel's eyes flickered, guilt breaking through his anger for just a second. Emily whispered, "Please don't destroy each other completely." But destruction was already done. I stared at Daniel, seeing not the boy who once swore forever, but the man who severed us. My hands loosened, not in surrender but in strength. I whispered, "I'm done bleeding for you." The words stung more than any punch could. Sarah's voice cut through the storm like thunder. "Enough," she said, her tone sharp with finality. We all froze, her presence a mirror reflecting the wreckage we had become. She stepped forward, eyes burning with disappointment, and whispered, "I warned you both, but pride blinded you." Emily sobbed harder, Daniel's face hardened, and I felt my heart collapse under the weight of her words. Sarah didn't scream. She didn't need to. Her calmness was louder than our rage. I realized this was not just the end of friendship, it was the funeral of everything we once were. The room felt hollow after the storm, a graveyard of words too heavy to take back. Daniel stood rigid, fists unclenched but spirit broken. Emily sat trembling, her tears streaking down like rivers that couldn't stop. I felt my chest ache, not from rage now, but from the unbearable silence of something permanently dead. I whispered, "The friendship we buried tonight won't rise again." Daniel's jaw trembled, but no sound left his lips. Emily's sobs grew softer, the kind that echo long after they stop. Sarah's voice filled the void, low and sharp. "This is what betrayal leaves behind, ashes." And she was right. I walked outside into the night, the cold air biting like truth against my skin. The sky stretched endless above me, stars shining with indifference to our shattered world. I whispered to myself, "We promised forever under skies like this, and now even the stars feel like liars." My breath came in shallow bursts, fogging in the night air. Behind me, I heard Daniel's footsteps pause in the doorway, but he didn't follow. He stood there, silent, as though a wall had been built between us, stronger than stone. Emily's faint sobs leaked from inside, and Sarah's voice murmured something I couldn't hear. I looked up and realized healing wouldn't come tonight. Emily came to me quietly, days later, her voice trembling as she said, I never meant for it to destroy you." Her eyes brimmed with guilt, but no apology could sew the wound. I looked at her and whispered, "You weren't just the reason, you were the blade." She gasped, covering her mouth, tears falling. I turned away before she could answer because forgiveness was not something I could give. Not yet, maybe not ever. Her presence felt heavy, her silence even heavier. Walking away felt like dragging chains, but staying would have been worse. The pieces of us scattered with every step. Daniel sat alone by the basketball court we once owned with laughter. His head hung low, elbows resting on his knees, hoodie pulled over his face. I stood at the edge of the fence, watching him in silence. He didn't see me, or maybe he chose not to. The ball sat still on the cracked pavement, a relic of a brotherhood that no longer existed. I whispered into the night air, "You're a stranger now." The wind carried my words away, leaving only the hollow sound of chains rattling on the old hoop. He never looked up, and I never stepped closer. Sarah's words returned as if etched into my bones. "Ashes are what betrayal leaves." She met me on the quiet street and asked, "What will you do now?" I hesitated, my chest heavy with the weight of loss, then whispered, "I'll rise, but not the same." She nodded, eyes steady, a silent agreement that scars could also be shields. Emily had faded into shadows, Daniel into guilt, but I was left with choice. The pain would never vanish, but neither would the strength forged from it. My steps felt unsteady, but they were mine. Days later, I stood before the mirror, staring at a reflection I barely recognized. My eyes were red but steadier, my jaw tighter, my heart no longer soft with denial. "This scar will not fade," I whispered, touching the faint lines beneath my eyes. The betrayal had carved me into someone new, someone harder. Behind me, silence pressed against the glass, as if even the walls remembered the shouts. I thought of Daniel's face, twisted with envy, of Emily's tears dripping like rain, of Sarah's words etched into the cracks of my heart. I whispered again, "You chose love over loyalty, and I buried us in the wreckage." The mirror didn't lie. I was both broken and reborn. I returned to the rooftop where our promises had once been carved into the night sky. The stars above glistened, indifferent to broken vows. I whispered into the cold air, "We swore forever, but forever was shorter than I thought." My breath fogged, vanishing into the dark. The skyline shimmered in neon and moonlight, but the rooftop no longer felt sacred, only haunted. I imagined Daniel beside me, laughing like he once had, Emily standing in shadows, Sarah watching from a distance. Ghosts of the living, chained forever to the night we betrayed each other. I clenched my fists, whispered one last time, "Forever is dead." Emily walked past me one final time, her face pale with regret. She said softly, "If I could undo it, I would." I didn't look at her because the weight of her words couldn't repair what she shattered. I muttered, "Regret doesn't rebuild graves." She stopped in her tracks, her breath catching, and then she walked on, fading into the distance. The sound of her footsteps echoed like a farewell song. My chest tightened, but there was no turning back. Emily would carry her guilt, and I would carry my scars. Both were heavy, but hers would always be chosen, and mine forced. Daniel sat across from me days later, uninvited, his eyes hollow. He whispered, "I lost everything, and I deserve it." His words cracked, but lacked the weight of true repentance. I stared at him, the silence between us louder than any confession. I said coldly, "You didn't just lose me, you lost who you were." He flinched but didn't fight back. He looked down, his fingers trembling, as if even his own hands refused to hold him. I turned away, because looking at him felt like staring into a grave I once shared. His silence followed me out the door, a shadow I would never escape. I stood alone at the lake, the same place where promises once danced across ripples. The water glistened beneath the silver moon, calm but endless like the ache inside me. I whispered into the stillness, "They didn't just betray me. They betrayed every version of us we could have been." My voice cracked, but the words hung heavy, echoing back from the dark water. My reflection looked older, colder, like betrayal had carved years into my face. The silence was final, but it was honest. And honesty was all I had left.